Hi, this is Eli Bartley with Danuser. We're here today to talk about installing a grapple kit on your T7 or your T8 Hornet. The first thing you're going to want to do is review the installation instructions provided with the kit. After thoroughly reviewing the instructions, you'll want to get your tools put together. You will need a torque wrench, two 9/16 wrenches, a pry bar, an 1 1/8" socket and wrench, blocking, an impact wrench or ratchet, a 3/4 inch wrench, 11/16 wrench, 1/4 inch Allen wrench, and then a 3/8 bolt, a minimum of 2 inches long, and two 3/8 nuts. So once you have all your tools put together, you're going to want to get your Hornet and remove the cover plate using a 3/4 inch wrench or socket. Set the cover plate and hardware off to the side. You'll need it later. If your driver has the ballast weights installed, at this point in time you would need to remove them. This driver does not have the weights, so we'll skip on down to the next step. The next step is to install the Hornet on your machine. After you've attached your Hornet to your machine, you're going to want to choose a suitable work platform. In this case, we have a welding table. You're going to want to get your blocking prepared. We've used 6x6 blocks. 2 of them are 16 inches long and 1 is 10 inch. And how we laid it out here is shown in the instruction kit. After you've turned off the vehicle, you're going to want to remove the 8 bolts attaching the quick attach plate to the Hornet power cell. After all 8 bolts are removed, you're going to want to turn back on the vehicle and carefully pick up the quick attach plate and move it to the very bottom set of holes. It's roughly 6 inches. If you raise the quick attach plate too high or move too far in any direction, since your hoses are still connected, you will damage the hoses. So you want to be careful when you're moving this back. So we'll go ahead and start the skid. Move it back. Before disconnecting your skid steer from the quick attach plate, you'll want to install 5 of the bolts you just removed, 4 of them on the right-hand side and 1 on the top hole on the left-hand side, and just get them hand tight. Now that you have those 5 bolts installed, the remaining 3 bolts you removed earlier can be discarded. Next, we will disconnect the skid steer from the quick attach plate. So we've spun the skid steer around 180 here to give a better view of what we're going to be doing next with installing the grapple. The next step would be disconnecting the skid steer if needed. With this setup, we have ample room to get the grapple installed. Like mentioned earlier, we just want to make sure the work platform is sturdy enough and everything's fully supported for safety purposes. Next, you want to make sure you get your hardware all laid out and get your grapple kit ready to go. It's best if you have a second person. The grapple case and mount is somewhat heavy, so you want a second person to assist in getting it into place. Once you get it into place, in between the front and the back clamp plate, you're going to install 5 bolts. The 3-inch long bolts will be used in the back plate on top here, and the 2.5-inch bolts will be used in the front plate on the bottom. You'll just want to get those put in and leave them hand tight. Okay. Once you have the grapple case and mount installed, it's time to install the grapple spring. You'll start with putting the grapple in the grapple case itself. You'll want to make sure that the hook on the spring is pointed up. Install that. Next, you'll want your 3/8 bolt, minimum of 2 inches long, and 2 3/8 nuts. Take the first nut and thread it up the bolt a little ways, and then insert it into the top hole on the grapple spring ear. Take the second nut, put it on the bottom of the bolt just to hold it in place. Just hand tight's all right. Next, you're going to need your pry bar, and there's 2 different options of where to put the grapple spring. Check your installation kit instructions to see which position you need to put it in. In this scenario, we have a T8 RR, so we're going to put it in the bottom notch. So you take your pry bar, put it through the ear on the spring, and use the bolt to pry against. Kind of line it up with the notch you're going into, and then put it on in. Once the grapple spring is installed, remove the 3/8 bolt. This concludes the grapple spring installation. After the grapple spring is installed, you're going to want to take an 1 1/8 socket, an 1 1/8 wrench, and tighten up all 10 bolts that we've installed and left hand tight. There'll be 8 in the quick attach plate and 2 down here for the grapple mount. I've tightened up 9 of the 10 bolts with the impact. This one in the top front of the grapple mount we'll have to tighten with a ratchet due to our setup here. Once they're all tightened up, it's good to have a second person. We'll use the torque wrench and we'll get them torqued to 375 foot-pounds per the manual. Once you have all 10 bolts torqued down to spec, you're going to want to hook up the hydraulics. To do that, you're going to want to remove the manifold cover using two 9/16" wrenches. Once you have removed the manifold cover, there are two plugs in the CA and the CB ports of the manifold. You'll need a 1/4" Allen wrench to remove these. It's a good idea to have a catch pan to catch any hydraulic oil that may leak out when you remove these two. Once those are removed, you'll want to install the two fittings that came with the kit using a 3/4" wrench. After the fittings are installed, you'll want to connect the grapple hoses to those fittings. Be sure and check your installation instructions for the pictorial of how to get the hoses routed up through all three hose holders. Once you have the hoses routed through all three hose holders, you'll want to connect the hoses to the two fittings you just installed. You want to see which hose goes to which port on the grapple cylinder. First, you'll connect the hose going to the boss side, in this case the top side of the cylinder, to the CA port. Now these are O-ring face seal fittings and connections. You'll want to get them hand tight and only go about 1/4 turn to snug them up. And you'll do that using an 11/16" wrench. When tightening the hoses down, you'll want to make sure that the hoses are kind of pointed towards the box on the quick attach plate. That way they do not interfere with the manifold cover. The second hose goes to the CB port, and it is coming from the rod side of the grapple cylinder. Once you have the hoses tightening in place, you'll reinstall the manifold cover with the same hardware and two 9/16" wrenches. Once the manifold cover is reinstalled, you're done on this side of the driver. We'll move to the other side of the driver and install the kickstand. Now, next we're going to move over to the right side of the machine and install the kickstand assembly. The kickstand assembly bolts onto the back side of the front clamp plate using these two holes. You'll use the last two 2.5" long bolts that came with the kit. And just like the other bolts, we'll torque these down to 375 foot-pounds. This concludes our grapple kit installation. Once you have everything attached and ready to go, it's time to take it out and drive a few posts with it. Be sure to look over your operations section in your operator's manual on how to effectively use the grapple. A few things to note: when you're on a post driving, the grapple should be in the open position, and when you run your hydraulics in the opposite direction, the grapple jaws will close. Once you've driven a few posts with it, bring it back in, check over your hoses, your connections, make sure you don't have any hydraulic leaks. Check over the bolts you installed to make sure they're still nice and tight and everything's good to go. If you have any other questions or concerns, please visit danuser.com and look under the Contact Us section. Feel free to send us an email or give us a call. Appreciate you watching. Thank you.